The Beauty is back this week with episode 6 of the season, and this was a very different episode to what we've had in the show so far. There was no Cooper, no Jordan, no Jeremy, but instead we spent the first third of it watching the aftermath of Byron kidnapping Ray the scientist, him delving into the catastrophic, all-consuming virus that it basically is. And then we also met two new characters, Mike and Clara, as there was a twist that connected all the way back to the very beginning of the show and the first hit that we saw Antonio taking out in Italy. So with that, let's dive into the deeper themes of this episode. I'll discuss how it compares to the previous ones, and I'll answer if the show is still of a decent quality now that we're 6 episodes in. So let's get into it. Here is The Beauty, episode 6, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. What the beauty means for Byron. During the beginning of the episode, we saw that this newfound beauty that Byron had went straight to his head, and he couldn't even wait until he'd touched ground before cheating on his wife again. He was using his new and improved, let's say, tool on the air hostess as Ray was being held captive, and he was informing him how there weren't enough studies done into the long-term effects of the beauty, but how what he was doing with the hostess was essentially passing it over to her. And with the ability that it has to spread because it was a virus, he was essentially weakening the value of what he had running through his veins that he planned on selling. This was why when he reached the ground, she was killed before she could even get in the car. It showed that not only did Byron steal the beauty, but he was also holding onto it for himself when it wasn't even his. Byron was viewing himself as a god, and with that new confidence that he had, the very piece of dialogue that he said at the end of the episode, which was, "Beautiful people don't think the rules apply to them," it was something that he was quite literally exhibiting himself. He was being cruel to his wife. He viewed her as below him because she had decided that aging gracefully was something that she wanted to do, and he was putting such value on surface level characteristics. Beauty to him wasn't how somebody acted, it was all about how somebody looked, and that was why he was cruel to the core. His wife still viewed him as the same person, even though he was totally transformed, and she hated him. He had all the money in the world, but money wasn't buying him the very thing that he wanted most, which was youth and the ability to look like the perfect man. This showed that he valued beauty over wealth, which I thought was quite interesting. When Ray was looking through the microscope at the blood of Byron, he saw that it was quite literally exploding after a short period of time. This was where we saw that Byron was prepared to kill Ray because he allowed him to put something inside of him that was a ticking time bomb, and it was going to explode within 800 days. However, with Ray saying that he was able to create serums and boosters that would keep the exploding at bay, he kept him alive. With Byron being the most beautiful person in the world, in his eyes, he no longer viewed himself as Byron. He wanted Ray to get onto his knees and kneel before what he said was his god. The ability for people to transform being something that's in the palm of his hands, and whilst also being in control of the distribution of it, he quite literally feels like a god. There's something about the parallels of the beauty being a virus which feels quite fitting. What we've seen with the people that take the beauty is that it changes their personalities completely, and they act entitled and like they're better than those that are around them. They almost become a virus to society with the way that they act. You'd think that because they were once on the opposite side of it all, they wouldn't act like that, but they do. So the beauty is a virus in the medical sense, but also the metaphorical sense. Mike and Clara's experience. I was a bit confused when we were introduced to Mike and Clara, but as the episode unfolded, we got to see behind the scenes with the beauty being made and the perspective of Mike, which reminded me a lot of Jeremy, but also Clara. Somebody that was transitioning and was feeling the toll from the weight of the journey that they were going through. Mike was somebody who felt like he was inferior in society because of the way that he looked. He lacked confidence and he didn't do much with his time, which I think was probably the bigger issue, not his appearance. However, he was in a position where he was ready to love somebody and also to be loved, but he didn't have anyone. He even said how he tried being nice, but that it just wasn't enough for the world anymore. This brought to light the way society can often be in the way that people judge people based on the way that they look, rather than what they're like at their core. With Mike having a crush on somebody called Jen and not realizing that she was engaged, it brought to light the core issue, and that was that he simply didn't actually know her. She didn't judge him on his looks in the slightest. In fact, it was quite the opposite. She gave him the time of day, but even he didn't think that that was enough. With him finding out about Larry, the chimpanzee, being given the beauty and it backfiring because after it transformed into the perfect build of a chimpanzee, the rage took over. He ultimately took a couple of the injections for himself and Clara because he believed that it would make him look better and allow him to fit into society more. After he underwent the transformation, he looked into the mirror, he hit the same poses as to what Jeremy did when he transformed, and from there, he then started speaking in the mirror to himself as if he was asking Jen out on a date. That instantly leaned into the entitled mindset that the virus gave people, because even knowing that Jen had a fiancé, he was willing to try and get in the way of that. Before he transformed, we didn't know that Mike was the person from the early episode in the season, but when it said 2 years later and it cut to when Byron and Antonio were in Italy, this brought to light that the stealing of the serum was something that Byron wasn't happy with. It took time for Antonio to track him down, as we saw he literally grazed arms with him when Antonio was walking to his apartment. But after 2 years, he finally did. Byron playing God was something that was leaned into all over again in this section, where he said how he wanted Mike to suffer for what he did. Mike stole the Tier 1A serum that was held back for Byron's closest friends, but instead, Mike took it and went out there and infected people. This showed us that Mike is Patient Zero, the person that the episode is named after, and through him being intimate with people, that was essentially how the virus got out there. As those that Byron gave it to out of goodwill, they were told the rules and what to and what not to do. This is also why they haven't exploded, because Byron allows them to use his facility for the boosters, which takes the heat out of them. If Mike never stole it, then the product wouldn't be out in the world, and Byron would have been able to have taken it to market by now. When it came to Clara, she'd begun her journey of transitioning, and the fact that she had the parts of a man, it was something that was impacting her mental state. What this showed us was the time period that it took for her to transition in a completely different way, and the mental and physical toll that it could have. Whereas with the beauty, we were seeing that people could transition into being beautiful without any of those issues whatsoever. Somebody that was trans taking it was an interesting perspective, because what it showed was that the beauty transformed the person into what they believed was beautiful in their mind. So with Clara taking it, we saw that when she emerged after having the fever and also the bones cracking, she emerged as a woman. A part of the story that also occurred during this section was that Jen ended up getting bitten by Larry the chimpanzee before he was killed by the guard. This didn't really get picked up again, but I wonder if it will later on down the line. Is she the first true Patient Zero because she was bitten by an animal? Did something slightly different happen to her, or did she end up being taken out by Antonio at some point? I hope we find out in the next episode. My review of the episode. Even though this one was a little bit different, I did still enjoy it. Personally, I would have preferred it if it was more focused in the present day rather than the flashback, because I feel like there's so much story that needs to be told before the show concludes in just 5 episodes' time. But now that we've had a clear backstory the past 2 episodes on how the beauty was created, why Byron is like the way that he is, and also Patient Zero, it now means we can get focused on the present day storyline. With us seeing that Ray has created boosters and serums in order to prevent Byron from exploding, I think that could end up being the way that Jordan ends up being saved. Ray did also mention in this episode that he was going to be looking to create a cure, so he might also do that. The lab that we spent a large portion of time in during this one was a place that I thought was pretty cool. It reminded me a little bit of Black Mirror and Severance combined. It was a very dystopian place, and the fact that none of the workers truly knew what they were working on added to the mysterious setting and connected back to what Ray said, where he said that he was like a watchmaker. The beauty industry has been at the heart of this show, with it more so being focused on the way that society looks at beautiful people and people that aren't deemed to be beautiful. But what this episode brought to light was the animals that often get used and tested on in the industry for the sake of products that get rolled out for public consumption. Jen even said herself how she was letting her morals slide because she was accepting a big pay packet, so it spoke of how people will go against what they believe in for the sake of money. This was a really intimate episode in being very character driven and focused, and I thought that worked really well. It provided a bit of a change, but what I will say is I'm definitely ready to get back into the action of the show with the detective side of things, and also Antonio going round and getting the people that have been negligent. I also want to see more of the disgusting side of the show, like what we saw in the first 4 episodes. The past 2 have been relatively tame, so I want that gruesome gore to return. Overall, I am enjoying this show, and it feels like Ryan Murphy's best show in a while. There's a level of originality to it, and even though it has slowed down a little bit the past couple of weeks, I feel it'll pick back up again. So, there you have it, The Beauty Episode 6 Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on The Beauty, then check the playlist below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of this week's episode? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.